I personally would say, found a lot of, wherever I went, I found a lot of people that they couldn't do enough for me. If I needed something, but depending on the individual, really, you know. But overall, I would say overall, the Scots people were very, very nice to us.
On the 19th of June 1940, General Sikorski flew to London to have a meeting with Winston Churchill. At that meeting, it was agreed by the British that Polish troops should be evacuated from France. Accordingly, that same day, orders were given by the British Admiralty to evacuate Polish soldiers from the western ports of France. Those Polish soldiers evacuated mainly arrived in Plymouth and Liverpool. For those who arrived in Liverpool, very quickly they were put onto trains and taken north to be placed in camps in the Biggar, Douglas and Crawford areas of Scotland.
I went through various camps before we have arrived to Scotland, and the base that was assigned to our regiment, which was the 14 Lancers Regiment, but instead of horses, as you know, we had the tanks by then, you know, and we were stationed in Loder.
My father, Jan Stepik, was born in Poland, now part of Western Ukraine, near Lviv in 1922. He grew up on a farm, and then when the war broke out, the family were taken to Siberia. He survived Siberia, got to Tehran in Iran, and joined the Polish army, transferred to the Polish Navy, and he ended up in Scotland.
It was a great surprise to the citizens of Glasgow to find Polish troops arriving in their city. They were very warmly welcomed by the Glasgow citizens who cheered them, and very young lads would run in and ask the soldiers for souvenirs. The soldiers could oblige by maybe passing them even sometimes Romanian currency from their times when they escaped from Poland into Romania. The main purpose of the Polish army in Scotland was defence of the East Coast. It was feared that the Germans might make a diversionary attack from Norway, and hence the presence of troops along this vulnerable sector of the Scottish East Coast. To designate that you were a Polish soldier, you wore a British Army uniform, but of course you could wear Polish insignia. And one of the requirements was that for Allied troops in this country, that they should wear a shoulder flash with Poland written on it. This was worn on both sides of the shoulder. This badge was much sought after, and indeed it might be the case sometimes that a British or other Allied soldier would try to get his hands on this shoulder patch, put it on and pretend to be Polish, that way having a better favour, if you like, from the women. Poles had a very much more politer attitude towards women. For example, they would always be, at the end of the dance, taken back to their seat. And of course, they enjoyed the way that the Polish soldier might greet his Scots friend by a kiss on their hand. This was quite a different behaviour from the local Scots laddies that they were used to. One of the difficult decisions that faced the Polish soldier after the war was what to do. Do I return or not? Or do I just wait and see what happens?
My father had been one of the Polish Navy's first radar operators, so he knew electronics, and he thought that may be a career move. So he came up to Glasgow by train, and he arrived at Glasgow Central Station, and it was during Glasgow University's Freshers' Week which is the first week before the university starts, and all the students were at the station and they were all dressed up in fancy dress, and my father said he thought it was like he'd come into an asylum, a lunatic asylum.
Zrobiliśmy swoje i każdy miał wybór, gdzie pójdzie. Każdy miał wybór. Dużo wróciło ludzi do Polski, którzy byli żonaci i dzieci. Ja byłem sam. Ale były czasy, że my byśmy się wybierali jechać do kraju. Były czasy, żona chciała jechać.
So I was sort of toying up, staying here, or going either to Australia or South Africa. But in the last second, I stepped back and stay in this country.
Many men opted to join the Polish Resettlement Corps, which was set up in September 1946. Membership of the Corps would last for 2 years, and it was a requirement that Polish soldiers should take up jobs which were offered by the Ministry of Labour.
I was transferred to another office at the Polish Military Bureau in Glasgow. I was there about a year. Then my turn also came to be demobbed, so I was taken up down to England to a place where you were officially discharged from the army. You got all necessary paperwork, but at the same time you got a civilian outfit. It means you got the complete suit, shoes, hat. I still got a hat at home, you know.
General Matrek, who formerly commanded the 1st Polish Armour Division, was appointed 1st Polish Corps Commander in Scotland. After the end of the war, he found himself, along with other officers, in very difficult situation. The Polish government decided to make a number of Polish officers non-persons and took away their Polish citizenship. General Matrek, a professional soldier, had to find work in Scotland, and he chose the trade of a barman, working at the Lermonth Hotel in Edinburgh.
There were, of course, issues in terms of employment at the end of the war, and a lot of the trade unions were saying send them back to Poland, especially because a lot of the trade unions were communist dominated and they couldn't see what was wrong in going back to Poland under Stalin. So obviously those of the Polish people who had been sent to Siberia had a different view of what going back to Poland under Stalin was.
Many Scots gave out invitations for Polish soldiers to come and visit for tea, and indeed some even for a bath. But one lady reported that she had invited an officer and had said to her, I request the pleasure of your company. And so this lady looked forward to seeing this officer. Opening the door, she found about 60 or 70 men stood outside her house and wondered, but the officer said, well, you invited my company, and here we are.
My wife keep an eye on me. If I said any word the wrong way, she corrected me immediately, you know. So I was able to speak quite fluently English very early after being demobbed, you know. And this is how I was able to get into that big store in Wiley Lochhead, because otherwise, well, if I couldn't speak English, how do they expect me to serve the customers of theirs? And they were all well-off people at that time anyway. So the buyer actually suggested to me, Mr. Rutkowski, change your name, because what if you were going to find it as it was at that time. People were different then as far as the foreigners were concerned, you know. Now, visualize, he just said to me, your customer comes, you're serving them, and they cannot pronounce your name, because they did find it difficult then to pronounce Polish names, you know. So he said, for your own business, in order that you could get more customers, because on the number of customers you get it, you're getting on every sale an extra bonus. And that was of interest to me, you know. So he said, change your name to a short one. And then you'll find that you'll get more customers, because they will know you by name and they'll come to you. And I promptly changed the name from Rutkowski to Roots.
In the summer of 1945, there were nearly 60,000 Polish troops in Scotland. But with repatriation, emigration, and other reasons, that number dwindled by round about 1950 to some 10,000 Poles who still remained in Scotland.
Wy jesteście inni niż my. Myśmy przyjechali w innym celu, wy w innym celu. To jest różnica. My stale marzyli, żeby wrócić do kraju. Bośmy nic nie wiedzieli o kraju. A druga rzecz, my w innej sytuacji wyjechali. Polska się dopiero dorabiała, bo wiecie jak to było. Ale dali nam tylko 20 lat i znów zabrali z powrotem Polskę. A tu jest ta demokracja i nic by się nie bali. Nie baliśmy się niczego, że nas zamknął albo coś.
There was very little antagonism towards these people who felt that they had to stay in Scotland, and the general impression was that the Scottish people got on very well with the Polish people from the wartime generation, and that there was a real integration and a real warmth both ways.
If you go to any country, you get individuals. There are individuals, they don't like you, whatever reasons they had it. And there was a lot of Scots people, you know. They had sort of foreigner, or the fact that we are Poles and fighting for their freedom as well, you know. They didn't come into their head at all, you know. Just they didn't like foreigners, you know. So some of them were sort of reluctant even to speak to you. But that, as the time was passing by, it was changing slowly, you know. Nowadays, if you're a foreigner, well, so what?